So I'm down here on the highway, and it's after rainfall. This is when the highway is least slick, because what happens, the oils wash away. But we don't want them to leach into where? The shrubs. We don't want the water runoff from the roadway to go into the soil. If it goes into the soil, then it can leach down into the groundwater. So we want to have good sewer systems. So you want to put those little vents, those little grates with the little slots along the highway roadside. So when it runs, it captures the water, which captures the oil. Now it's going to go into the water treatment plant, but here's secondary. Those sewer systems need to be upgraded where they're not porous, so the oil doesn't stick to the side of the sewer. So the runoff with all the oil, and it has rubbers. You know how much rubbers you can recapture? All the roadway, all those rubber, as the tires go on, as it wears off, and that's rubber residue, and that runs down into the sewer systems. Do you know the sewer systems can be a massive source of revenue? It costs for the pipes in that, but if the recapture on the back end is done right, and you're separating the material out that comes through the waste system, it makes a profit. That means the sewers are paid for. And upgrades, you have more than enough money to upgrade the system anytime you want to upgrade the system, because the runoff becomes highly valuable. And so the runoff here can go in and it can be separated out. It can go through treatment, and then it can go into all kinds of things. You don't necessarily have to throw the water into the river. So again, the water treatment has retention areas, and those retention areas can be designed with ecosystems under them, algae and other things under them, so when the water comes in, after it's stripped and the water sits in these retention areas, the agriculture, the vegetation continues to purify the water. And then after, in the holding tank, which is the retention area, like in Japan, see, it's all cement down there. You don't want cement. You want to create a biological ecosystem on the ground. And so when the water comes in, it feeds into the bioecosystem. And when the water goes out, you can harvest seaweed, or there's freshwater seaweed. You can harvest all kinds of natural grasses that grow underwater, all kinds of biological. So that big water retention thing they have in Tokyo, as they bleed out the water and wait for the next filling, they can also harvest the crop. And so as the water moves out, they can harvest all the biological, and they get all kinds of different underwater, freshwater crops. And at the same time, it purifies the water that's being held, and that can go in and feed the Tokyo water system. And it goes through a treatment plant before it goes into the retention system in the first place. And the treatment plant strips out all the oils and rubbers and other materials, any types of waste in there, separating them out and breaking that down into its components to further gain value from the treatment plant. And then the biological base comes in, the water comes in, and it feeds. Now, you're not going to have aquatic life because you're going to bleed it down, and it's going to go down so you can harvest the biological life, the living organisms, the plants, and all other types of biological life. But there is going to be no aquatic life, no fishes or any of that. But then the water fills back up. So it's like a farm. In that big thing is one big farm. And it gets fed with the floodwaters. And it's stuff that grows underwater. And it helps purify the water, put oxygen and other nutrients in the water. And then that gets to feed Tokyo, as an example. But we have a huge retention center in Chicago. But they make the ground, it's just one big box. They don't think about making a biological farm. And so every time it rains in that, the water goes in through the treatment into the store, and then back out into the irrigation systems. So it's a purifying tank, but also when the water runs down, you can harvest biological matter from the bottom, all kinds of vegetation that can be harvested to make different agricultural products, or you can harvest it to make plastics or biofuels or whatever you want. It depends on what type of vegetation you put down there. And yes, if it's dry for a while, you might have to go in to keep the ecosystem going, water it yourself. But it's easy. You can just, from the side, just spray water through a, fanning system, like in the hose, they have the different screens, and it just puts the mist and it goes down. They keep the ecosystem running when there isn't any rainfall, in case it's been dry for a while. Then you'll have to water it, but that's no big deal. So that retention system that we're building in Chicago, it can be a source of incredible amount of money. And you can do all kinds of study of fresh water and study the water and how the agriculture, the vegetation purifies the fresh water. It deals with better contaminants better than other contaminants, and what it puts back into the water in the way of minerals and elements and so on. And you can work on this ecosystem of purifying and creating amazing water for the Chicago water system. So again, it can be awesome. And I want to mention something on group health. Do you know? Say you and your wife have insurance. And say you have kids. Well, figure out which family plan is better. But no, you're not going to take the family plan. You're going to take the spouse plus children. It's lower than the family. Spouse plus children. Why is that? Well, say you're working at Walsh Brothers. If you take the single plan, you don't have to take the couples plan. You don't have to take the spouse plus children. You don't have to take the family plan. Why would you take it? Because Walsh Brothers pays 90% of the premium for an individual. 90%. And then you compare that to what your wife is taking when she takes, say you take the spouse plus children on her plan. If that company pays, because when you get into the spouse plans and that, Walsh Brothers only pays 50% of the premium. And I'm giving them an example. So take the premium at your wife and whatever the 50% rate is, and then see spouse plus children 50% rate, family 50% rate, and then take the single plan at Walls Brothers as an example, and you're only paying 10%. So you take that money and then you see what you would pay at the wife's, or flip it around. You take the family plan and the spouse plus children at Walls Brothers, and the wife takes the single plan at her employer. I don't think spouse plus children at both would be a good idea, but there could be an overlap, but insurance usually coordinates. But sometimes maybe there's a reason you both take spouse plus children and neither of you take the family plan. And you both take spouse plus children because there's some that gives your children two networks. And you have to look at the network because maybe they have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have United Healthcare. And now there's a reason that you want the children on the Blue Cross Blue Shield, but it's better for you to be on, say, the United Healthcare plan. But maybe one child is better off on the United Healthcare plan, and the other child is better off on the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So you have two networks available for you. And this is what I'm talking about, even when you're living together, and this is what I do. Me and Jen moved in, and if things would have not gone off, and I would have just been her domestic partner, and I would have been on her group plan. And so if you have a startup, only one of you needs coverage. Both of you don't need coverage in that event. So, cohabitating, getting a committed girlfriend, getting a committed boyfriend, and then getting what? Domestic partner. Even if you're in college, you shouldn't be doing it in high school. But if you're in college, and I've been with committed people like Amy and Mike Davis, who are at Willow Creek, they were committed in college. Most of the years of their college, they were exclusive. They met, and she was a Pi Phi, he was a Sig Ep. They met, and that was it. But say Mike worked part-time for Starbucks. Starbucks has what? Group health. And they moved in together, Mike and Amy, in college. Well, what happens? Amy is now a domestic partner and can be on Mike's, his group health plan as a domestic partner. And now Amy has health insurance. So one of you can work for a company and they offer full health insurance to part-time employees. We're not talking full-time. These are things that solve problems. These are things I never seen anyone do in group health, ever. I've been around like the greatest group health people for companies, and they don't do what I do. So again, you take me out of situations and then you rain down on these people like they're God's gift to mankind. And you give me, my life is horrible. And you prop them up and make their lives unbelievably good. How in any scenario is that possible being righteous? There is no possibility of that being just and righteous. And that means, I'm sorry to say, all of mankind dies. You have two chances. This is the second chance. And if you keep on screwing me out of what is mine, it is over for all of you. That's your decision. And you say, no, God just closes heaven and everybody upon their death just goes to hell. So you'll never know. And so the doorway, as I was told, will be closed. And if he has to condemn one or all of you and burns you from here to eternity, he will. And so the church will go on and they'll be saying that you'll be going to heaven and you can do these things. And then upon your death, you will realize that he didn't give a shit what you did. You're going to burn because you already crossed the line and there's no coming back. That's the point of Judas, and the Bible shows you through many others that once you cross the line, like Cain, he comes to God with an offering, trying to act as he's going to save himself. It's a burnt offering. So no matter what you do into the future, your future generations are already predestined for eternal damnation. As you can be predestined for what? Heaven? You can be predestined for eternal damnation. It's a two-way street. It's a double-edged sword. And so if you want to kill you and all the future generations and predestine them for eternal damnation, it's all on you. I tell you, you're making the decision for all future generations by what you do now. And it is. You're setting the path for the future. You're determining what the future will be. And so if you want to pre-condemn everybody and they go through the motions of false hope, then that's all on you. That's your choice. You chose to destroy my life and prop up others who are unworthy. And you chose to hold them in those places and give them praise and honor and dignity and respect and full lives and happiness and joy. And you chose to take it all away from me continuously. And you chose to honor them, the pieces of garbage. You chose to respect them. You chose to honor them, and this becomes the church of Satan. What do they do with Satan? They honor the false god. And they worship and they praise, but he's doing evil. It's not good. He's deceiving people. There's no deception in me. I'm transparent. I have no hidden agendas. You can ask everybody. The one thing they trusted about me is they could absolutely trust me. I don't hide agendas. I don't manipulate situations. It's like billions watching the show. Everybody is a manipulating piece of garbage. I can't find a good character. The psychologist, she's a manipulating piece of garbage. But it's entertaining. But you see all these, maybe X's wife might be the one, but again, she does stuff, so not even her. So, no, I can't find anyone. Maybe the little kids, but they don't show them that much. But Axe's little kids, those little kids are spoiled little pieces of garbage. At least the assistant attorney, or Eastern Bloc Attorney General, not the AG, but the assistant AG, or whatever they call him, the federal prosecutor for the eastern region of the United States, his kids, they seem good. So there's a glimmer of hope. But basically across the board, everybody is not good. And you could say the black female compliance officer who he just fired, well, seemed like she might be good because she was making sure everything was legal, and he wanted to do something, and she advised, and he terminated her. So I guess she was the glimmer of hope. She was playing the compliance person. And it reminds me of Deborah, who used to work for us, who was a black lady, who I was a big supporter of hers. And people at the firm, they weren't. But she had skills and she was helping my assistant. And just because they were not positioning her correctly, we should have kept her. They let her go. I disagreed. I told her that. And we used to talk about magnesium and other products because she had some issues and we were talking about resolving the issues. But she went to Tucson and I helped her by placing her resume in several places. I tried as much as I could because she did me solids. I did her solids and tried to help her, and she finally landed a position. She moved to Tucson. I didn't encourage her to move to Tucson. She just happened to move to Tucson, Arizona. And she got a position and everything else, and I thought she was good. Other people had issues, and the issues dealt with who was using her resources, really. Not so much with her directly in her performance. It was who was paying for her and who was getting the value of her resources. And there was an internal feud over that. So it was letting her go solve the problem. And it did. Because then there's no argument over paying her and who's using her. Because the firm didn't dedicate it who gets access to her for what purposes. They didn't define any of this. And when you get an assistant and that assistant is there to help the firm, well, you have to define what can and can't be her responsibility and how much time they can dedicate to each employee. Truly, how much time they can help each employee, because people are looking at their bottom line and seeing what they're getting out of it. Like everybody complained at our firm with Ray. Even before he got hired, Sheila came into my office, pulled his resume, and said, what the hell is he going to teach me? He doesn't even have his Series 7. He doesn't have experience as a producer. What is he going to teach me? And he's going to be the managing partner at the firm. And then others, Nardash and all the rest weighed in because they got wind of who he was going to be. And all of them said, how can he be our boss? He doesn't have our experience. How can Ray be our boss and manage us? And from the beginning, it was doomed. He didn't have the skill base. He wasn't a wise sage that can bring great sales strategies and tactics and everything else. And all of a sudden, you're putting somebody who would be a subordinate to everybody at the firm as the manager. And he was there to recruit, and he didn't recruit anything successfully. And the recruits he brought in failed. And I told them before he brought them in, they're going to fail. I told them with Mike, there was one, he had, Nick paid for him to come over, gave him a stipend, and he had this fireplace market with all the firefighters. And I told him he's going to bust. And he worked with Nardesh, and I tried to help him, but he didn't tap into my help. I offered a lot of track to help him be successful, but he didn't really tap into mine, and he listened to others. Well, either way, his fire market network was tapped out. Just like they brought over the Indian guy and said and I looked at his thing and I said, his market is tapped out. He doesn't have any market. Mike didn't have any more natural market. They exhausted it. They reached their pinnacle. Bringing him over wasn't going to bring anything. And then I said that for other people, and they all failed. And they all failed the way I said they would fail. So I wasn't wrong about anything. Everybody I summed up correctly. And I did say if we're going to bring them over and keep them, how we could make them successful. But it has to be a change in focus. They need to augment what they're doing and move a little bit in a different direction. But they didn't. And then Ray told me he didn't like type A people because he wasn't helping them. And he'd bring in people that were type B in that, meaning they're not self-motivators, but if you tell them what to do and give them guidance, they do a good job, and they do. But if you're not willing to manage them, and these are people that need more day-to-day management, you got to set up the task, tell them what to do. Type B people are great at being second fiddles. The problem with type A people is they're highly motivated and they want to be the leader. And they can threaten you at the top. But they're self-starters and they're extremely motivated. But they want the pinnacle usually. But that's fine. You can set them out as department head in that. But remember, no matter what position they get in, they're only going to be happy in that position for a period of time, and they're looking for the next step up. And that's what happened with Bill Self when they brought him into the University of Illinois. He defined the program. They went to the NCAA tournament. They did well, Elite Eight, Final Four they might have gotten into. But every year they were getting better. The recruiting was getting better. But again, Illinois doesn't have that legacy program where you're going to be this incredible person when you go down in history. It's a building. He wants something now. He's not going to sit in the program like Dean Smith, who built North Carolina, or Coach K, who went over and built Duke. They're looking for long term. And so they're going to build it and stay in, and they're going to make the program iconic. But they know that it's all up to them, and the program has to be consistent over the long run to get the prestige. Bill Self, he didn't want to do that. He wanted the prestige now, today. He wanted the recognition right away. He didn't want to sit at the University of Illinois and build them as a championship and build them into the next North Carolina or Duke program, as an example. But Lute Olson did that with the University of Arizona. He moved from Iowa to Arizona, and then he built it, and it was a long-term investment. And he built it, and it became a prestigious program. But the next step is who takes over, and I'm disappointed in what happened to our basketball program, because it was going to be this incredible program, one of the best in the country, and they let it collapse. But the U of A would have been a household name. The University of Arizona would have been a household name every year, being in the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, Final Four. Even if you don't win the championship, you're within the top 16 teams as you go. Now, the top 32 is too many, and then it starts with 64. So you win one game and you're in 32. You win two games, you're in Sweet 16. The goal is to win 2 games every year. You want to be in the top 16 in the country. The top 32, still good if you can make it every year, if you can win 1 game every year. And then making the tournament, it's still prestigious to be in the top 64 every year. Don't miss a year. Every year you get into the tournament. That's prestigious as too. These are just steps in prestige. So if you're way out of it, then just getting into the tournament on a consistent basis can be very prestigious. And even when you're recruiting, you're still in the tournament every year. And the kids want to go to the tournament. And then if you don't get into the tournament every year, you can prove every few years they're going to be there, they're going to go to the tournament. So maybe every couple years you can get the program good enough to be able to make it into the tournament, to win a game or two every so often, and still you're pretty good. Even for a very non-prestigious program, that's still a fairly decent accomplishment. But what I'm saying is, he didn't want it. He wanted it now, so he went to Kansas. And he got it because Kansas is an iconic program. And so you get these things, and you get it right now. And that's why Notre Dame, like going to coach Notre Dame. But the thing is, with Notre Dame, they've been losing consistently over the last couple decades. Truly, they've been losing over the last decade and a half consistently, not winning a national championship, not being in the tournament, and they've been consistently poor. They're starting to lose their prestige. They're a program that was and is not is. Like the Chicago Cubs. It's never been great. The Yankees have, but if they don't make it every so many years, then you don't have to win a World Series, but you need to make it to the championship game and that. The Chicago Bears started to in the 85, but what did the Bears do after the 85? Walter Payton retired, and they dismantled the team. Also, what happened after 85? Buddy Ryan left. So you get Walter Payton, your iconic running back. He leaves, and you don't have a replacement. And you don't have a superstar quarterback, because just Jim McMahon left after that soon too. And so now you don't have the quarterback, you don't have the running back, and now you lose the defensive coordinator, and then you start losing Wilbert Marshall and other pieces. You make it to the playoffs and I think the championship game the next year still, but you further dismantle the team. And then Ditka leaves and so on. And it was right after winning the championship, it was destruction. Now, it wasn't planned that way, unlike, and this is what can't happen in baseball, the guy who bought the Florida Marlins, he only wanted to win a championship, and he spent unbelievably, and he drove up the salaries throughout Major League Baseball. He spent like a drunken sailor, paying everybody way above their market average to get them to build a championship team. And they did. They beat the Cubs, and they won the World Series. And what did he do next year? He unloaded everybody. He dismantled the whole team. The next year, they were back in the basement. You can't do that. They can't allow that in professional sports, that you can just buy a championship and overpay, because what do? You set these negotiations for mediation and arbitration. You set high benchmarks for new salaries. And so what did he do? He milked every other owner and their investors out of a fortune. Now, the players made out like bandits. The players made out like bandits. And they got unbelievable. They were overpaid upon salary negotiations and everything. It rained money for them. And that's where you got into the tension between the owners and the investors and the people that run the stadium and so on. Because what happens when the owners and investors not making their money? Well, what are they going to do? Well, they can't get it from the players because the salaries can't go down, right? They benchmark them and they move them up with and so on. So what do? They take it out on their vendors. and they squeeze the shit out of their vendors. And so they want more out of the food vendors. They want more out of the merchandise vendors. They want more, and they do. You know, the whole adage that poop rolls downhill? Well, what does it do? It goes up on one side and they take it from another side. That isn't fair play. So players got overpaid because of what happened with the Marlins, and owners allowed him to do this, and then he dumped the team. And he wasn't a long-term owner. He pumped and dumped. This is a sports franchise. A lot of people rely on it in the city, from t-shirts vendors to transit to people that sell, work in the, selling StubHub and everything else related to the franchise. You can't do that. You can't allow somebody to do that. That's why when they have an expansion team, they only allow you to catch so many good players. And you have to build it through. You're not going to be an overnight juggernaut, per se, in a way. Meaning you can't go out there and buy all the talent. So they limit how many of these players that you can buy. That's why they have the franchise tag, preventing other teams from stealing high talented players. So they underpay them. They give them the franchise tag, and they're allowed to hold them back from other teams being able to steal them away of buying the franchise or buying the World Series. That's why it was put in. It was protecting those players from other teams buying them. And sometimes, as an owner, you don't sell or let go of those players because it's not in your best interest, because they're going to drive up something and they're going to create a bubble where all of a sudden this team rises to the top like the Marlins, and then it's a bust. And that does baseball no good. And people feel burned. And afterwards, people talked about the fire sale and all the sports talk and the papers and how Major League Baseball, this is BS and so on. That, this person bought a championship and then they dumped the team and, but the players made out like bandits because they got all higher benchmarks on their salary. And so the teams had to overpay players for a while until it caught up to be fair market. But he set the benchmark so much higher that they were overpaid for a long time, making the baseball teams very unprofitable. And what did they do? They squeezed all their vendors. Go ahead, back in it. You have to go into the deep and drill down, but you'll see they screwed all their vendors, squeezing them for money. And these are the little guys, screwing the little guys. And that's what happens. They stuck it to the smaller businesses. And what happens with them? They're not as profitable. And when they're not as profitable, there goes the bonuses. The bonuses go down. Like at Walsh Brothers gave out turkeys for Thanksgiving, and then they didn't have the money. There goes the turkeys and other things. And because they didn't have profit sharing and so on. So all of that goes down or goes away. The 401k match is stopped or suspended. And that's because of the trickle on down. So you can't overpay people because it comes from somewhere. So all you can do is righteously pay people. And God tells you how you create strong, stable, long-term economies by people being paid fairly and correctly. Just because you have the money doesn't mean they should get the money. And that's why Apple sits with $100 billion or $200 billion in the bank. It doesn't go to the shareholders, nor does it go to the managers or the employees or anything else. It sits in the bank. Now, they invested in securities in that, and it's there to stabilize the franchise. If they have a down quarter in that, they can reposition the portfolio to create revenue. Oh, yeah. With having, say, 100 or 200 billion, you reposition the portfolio into revenue-producing stock. That goes to your profit. That gives you rising dividends or gives you stable profitability so you can pay the bonuses in that. So having a big fat portfolio is very good because you can reposition it with the managers, as I've done for clients when I need more income. Okay, then we have a rising dividend fund by Vanguard as an example, and I'm going to move a portion into the rising dividend and give you more current income. You're going to sacrifice some appreciation, but you need more current income. So now Apple can pivot, and their stock doesn't have to go down in value, and you don't have to miss the earnings call. Because remember, money from the portfolio is still earnings, and it goes into the earnings per share. So again, it allows them to pivot. And if things aren't as good, they can still find the bright spot by being able to pivot the portfolio. So, I don't know if I can go in or can't go in. So, again, I don't know why this is closed down. It boggles my mind. You set up cameras, and you can have little drone security guards. You know those little things that work on a cart? Well, get a 4-wheel little drone, and it just goes around with cameras and sensors, and it drives around on the ground, not flying in the air. And it just surveils the area. See, you think of flying. No, just a little drone vehicle, the ones that they're using for food delivery and that. Now they're just surveillance. And they drive around surveilling the area. So it's constant. And people see them and they can have flashing. But the point is, it scares them. And if they have good long-range sensors, good long-range cameras and everything, then it doesn't matter. By the time they see them, it's already long before seeing them. That's why you have long-range stuff, and before it sees you, the drone sees it. And so you can see them scattering or running off. Well, that person potentially did something wrong. So we can have these little drones going down the lakefront on wheels and constantly monitoring and having good long-range sensors. And you can have the drones in the water as well. Like I said, submarine drones on the shoreline, they just go under, back and forth. All they are is surveillance vehicles. And then you have the little boat that goes back and forth, and it's a drone, and it's a surveillance vehicle. So it works with demand. And so they can do continuous surveillance. And with shape recognition and everything else, there are ways to recognize if people run away from a scene. Obviously an alert would go out. So no, it can do it through artificial intelligence, and no one needs to watch the cameras anymore, because you can see with a gun, shape recognition. You can see somebody emptying the cash register and giving it to them, so they can recognize through shape recognition, through artificial intelligence. They shouldn't be opening the drawer of the cash register and cleaning out the bends in each bend in the cash register and handing it to the guy, even if he's not pointing a gun. And shape recognition, he has a mask on. Well, usually you're wearing a mask when you're robbing an establishment, right? So again, all this, they don't see the mouth, they don't see the nose. They don't see the skin. That's infrared. So you don't need all these people monitoring all the cameras all the time, and that's what AI is going to do. It's going to revolutionize security because it's going to monitor and get smarter at what it looks at. It can see that somebody is nervous, somebody is sweating inappropriately, and they wonder why, looking for suicide vests and that. So you don't have to have all these people looking at the cameras all the time. So it's going to revolutionize security in that way, where we can be safe. So you can have drones that roam around on the ground. And yes, aerial, but also drone submarines that guard the coast, that go around on Lake Michigan under the water, detecting boats above it, looking for people dumping. The big thing in the ocean, like all the cruise ships dump their raw sewage. But do you know who dumps a lot of raw sewage in open? Like, say, the Chinese Navy or other navies. They dump a lot of their waste right into the ocean. So it's not only cruise lines. How about fishing boats? They gut the fish and they dump all the waste into the ocean. That changes feeding patterns and that, where certain predators hang out, because they're dumping all the chum into the ocean. Truly. And so it causes a problem. And so you get this distortion or migration of predators like sharks and barracudas and many others. They change their migrating patterns. It really screws everything up. So they can't be doing this. And so those underwater drones are great for the military, that they can send them off in areas, even drone boats, as scouts. And they can examine and look at things without sending a manned submarine there. And then if they need to, a submarine always goes with a naval task force, then the submarine can. But the submarine can shoot it out the torpedo, the drone, and collect it back in through the torpedo. Oh yes, the drone can come back in through the torpedo hole. It's a vehicle. It just lines up with the torpedo hole through navigation. The torpedo hole is open, and it goes right in. The submarine can be moving. It doesn't have to stop. So the drone, the Earth is rotating as a plane is landing. So the submarine is moving, and it goes right into the torpedo hole. And it stops, and they open it up, and they take the drone out for service. Or they take it out so the torpedo's hole is free for live munitions or live torpedoes instead of drones, but they can send out numerous drones. And that means they can work with biologists, can be on there, and they can send out drones, and they can do all kinds of biological research. And the Navy can build out its intellectual properties of understanding the ocean's eco-life, and be a protector of the waterways, be a protector of the ecological life. Because that's very important to the preservation of mankind. And so the Navy can study all this now and work with marine biologists, and everything else can be on submarines. They can get security clearances, and they can, but they're not in those compartments. You know, the feed can go into the submarine, right into their quarters. And so there are areas of the ship that they can't go on. But they can work there, and this is where different departments. The submarine is great for going into hurricanes and sending up drones to the surface level, truly, or just below the surface, and watching the hurricane. They can watch it from the center of the eye by sending in a submarine. So there's a lot they can do, and this brings money into the military, because what do? They supply that data to private businesses. The government supplies that information to private businesses. And that's why you want to be an American corporation over other corporations. But we can sell it off as well to European corporations and others that maybe have domicile. And why would you want a corporation domiciled? And it has to be a wholly owned subsidiary in the United States. And it can have an American partner, but that corporation, say it's the French reinsurer company, I forget. Or how about Allianz, the German company, and they have a wholly owned, the Allianz, their wholly owned subsidiary of the German firm. They own PIMCO as well. That's owned by a German company, PIMCO and Allianz. And that's where Kashkarian was with PIMCO, but the other guy, the Arab guy, he works for them. Anyways, and that's where Bill Gross was, but that was